Hello warriors, this is Mars and welcome back to another ESO PvP build video. Today I bring you a Stamina Dragon Knight PvP build for small scale and solo PvP. The ANSEI no Shira, or Noble Sword Saint, is a dot focused build followed up with hard CCs and a burst combo that overwhelms opponents. You'll cut through enemies as if you had forced the Shi'ai out of your own will. With devastating strikes and a stalwart shield arm, the ANSEI is a warrior with unmatched prowess. To wield the blade and shield together in harmony is to envision your spirit as a maelstrom and a bastion. You will cut the world harder than the world cuts back. I hope you guys liked the little bit of dialogue in the beginning. I worked hard on that. If you don't, you can go fuck off. Anyway, this is a 2H sword and shield build. It's focused mainly for dot pressure with decent spammables. The spammables I use are pretty good. You just it's very combo intensive. I'll go through the combos near the end and some tactics for survival. Realistically, I mean, this build is pretty tanky, but it's not invulnerable. A good Stamplar or a good Magplar will fuck you up real quick, and necromancers will fucking end you if you don't take care of them really quickly. That's an understatement. But yeah, this build is pretty good. It works on any race besides Redguard. It's not race specific. You can use any race. The best races, however, is Nord and Orc. Nord, you can run this in medium and still be ridiculously tanky. Orc can have an enormous amount of damage and still be tanky. Redguard is just the bottom of the barrel right now, and probably is going into next patch from the patch notes that were shown. So, talking a bit more about the build, it has good sustain, it has good survivability. Although it lacks high resistances, it's able to turtle up extremely well if you play defensive at the right moments, and offensive capabilities are also very optimal. Just be mindful of engaging with too much pressure. This build is reliant on maintaining major and minor buffs, so your survivability is based on your ability to make the right decisions at a moment's notice. So just be mindful of when to turtle up, when to play offensive, and when to get the hell out and dodge. That's mainly it. So for the build, I'm going to go through the stat sheet, and I'm also going to tell you the options you have for food and races if you want to play it on a different race. Like I said before, this build is not race specific. You can run it on whatever race you feel like you want to. Just be mindful that you're going to have to make sacrifices somewhere if you don't have any specific food items, but I'll go through all that momentarily. But let's start with the unbuffed stats. It's a character sheet. So these are the stats unbuffed. Take it all in. Now these are pretty decent stats. They're not the craziest stats. Also, if you want weapon damage, you can go with the warrior. I did as much as I could to optimize the build. There's still some traits that I really feel like I need to change, but I'll talk about them momentarily. I'm choosing the lover as my mundus, but you can really, the build is really, you can go with any mundus you really want to, depending on what you feel like you're lacking, which I'll kind of explain that in depth when I talk about the races. Let me buff up for you. It's minor buff up, fully buff. In the front bar, these are your resistances. The resistance scale up higher with when blood spawn procs. Here's the back bar. So you get good sustain, you get good health recovery, and you have decent mag recovery. Now we are in 5 pieces heavy, so you do get more magicka sustain depending on when you take damage. So let's look at the food items. Let's go to slottables. So best food for the build, hands down, is our Tam takeaway broth, and this is for Orc, Nord, Imperial, Redguard, especially Redguard. And really, our Tam's all around best for this build. Sorry if I got too loud there. Our Tam's going to be the best just because you don't have to use the Serpent Mundus with your food items. Like if you use Bewitched Sugar Skulls, if you want good sustain on this kind of build, you'd have to have that even on a Redguard. Redguard has good offensive sustain, but poor passive sustain. It's got good weapon, and like I said, good offensive sustain but poor passive sustain. So if you want more stamina recovery and you wanted to run Bewitched Sugar Skulls, you'd have to run the Serpent, and it'd be absolutely doable, but you'd be sacrificing something else. Whereas Artaeum Takeaway Broth, you kind of are exempt from certain restrictions. Like with this, I can either switch to Warrior and run the Artaeum Takeaway Broth, or if I run the Artaeum Takeaway Broth, I'd run Warrior, or I could run the Lady, I could run the Lover, I could beef up my max Stam, I could get more health, or I could run the Steed, which is really good. Steed would be really good on this build if you want more mobility, since I don't use a snare removal. You have the options to run a snare removal if you are willing to run for momentum, but I'll go through skills momentarily. But yeah, these are just the best food items available on this build. Anything less is not optimal. So for potions, we run the typical tri-stats. These are, you're going to be a part of your sustain. Now I don't have the actual tri-stats, just have the crown tri-stats for now. I haven't crafted any. The other potions, we run dual stat. Well, I mean, it's tri-stat, but it's give you health and stamina with health recovery, with health restored over time. Run these when you don't have any more of these. So just health and health restored per second. These are still really good. You can run the ones that give you protections, but if you run out of powdered mother of pearls, oh yeah, this build, you don't necessarily have to run Artaeum Takeaway Broth. It's just the best. If you can't afford powdered mother of pearls, you're just gonna have to run Bewitched Sugar Skulls and have some sustain on the back bar, unless you have another form of sustain built into the build. But back to potions, yeah, we got the lingering health potions with the healing, and we have the essence of immovability. These are really good for BGs because this is mainly a non-CP focused build. It can work well in CP, but for when you're in those situations where you have to not be CC'd immediately, these are perfect. So we got the health, stamina, and immunity to disabling effects. So I will be having a lot of the potions crafting in the description. So we're moving on to poisons next. So these are my favorite for duel and for when you're in those solo or small scale situations. The drain health poisons. So these have the double drains. You can mix this up with the Stam if you want more Stam sustain. But realistically, I like these because when these proc and you maintain cauterize, you hit vigor, and you block, I don't want to say you're unkillable, but you're in a much more tankier state, and these do potentially crit, so keep that in mind. And now it says 2.3 seconds and 3.5 seconds, which means those technically carry over, so that's 3 ticks of healing every second. Well, that's 1 tick of healing every second, so that's 3 additional heals. And the other one is 4 heals. I've tested it myself. That's what it looks like. I like these a lot too. So we got the damage health poisons. So these give you that hindrance and gives you major expedition with a nice little dot for 4 or 3.5 or 4 seconds. And the classic double dots. Those are pretty standard. If you don't have these or know how to make these, I'll have these in the description as well. And yeah, let's move on to the sets. So for the sets, it's gonna be kind of diverse when it comes to weaponry. So I'm gonna take it slow. So 7th Legion Backbard. We got a Nirnroot axe. You have the option to run a Nirnroot Warhammer. Nirnroot is gonna be really good. You can go sharpened, so you can get more penetration on those ulti dumps. You have a lot of pen built into the build, especially for non-CP. And going into next patch, a lot of the changes are going to just increase weapon damage and physical and spell penetration. So you have a lot of options. Now, you can run an axe for this time and duration. It'll give you that bleed tick, but next patch you're going to have to make some changes. Just because axes will no longer bleed, but will give you increased healing. Two-handed swords will give you what increased weapon damage, and mauls will give you like I think 3,000 additional penetration. So I'm thinking next patch I'm probably gonna switch to a maul instead of an axe. If I feel like I need more healing, I'll probably switch back to the axe. If I want more penetration, I'll probably go towards the Warhammer. Now the sword and board, we're running 2-piece Witch Knight's Defiance, 1 in Nirnroot, and a sturdy shield with a prismatic glyph. Now there's some options here. I wasn't always running Nirnroot. I just got Nirnroot today. Nirnroot, like if you really want to cut through people, since I'm running the Lover Mundus, I have a lot of pen and a lot of weapon damage. It works really well, especially with healing. And you also have the option to go with decisive or defending. I've done defending on this build. It's pretty good, makes you a lot tankier. But I really like decisive specifically for like that ultimate generation. I was watching a El Lobo build a little while ago. Shout out to El Lobo, great content creator. So he essentially says that the ultimate generation is similar to the classic werewolf hide. So if you want more ult uptime, run decisive if you can manage it. I would, if you would want to, I'd say run this if your character was an orc, since essentially orc is going to have way more damage than a red guard anyway. So with the ultimate excuse me, I butchered that. With the ultimate uptime, you really be dropping those leaps faster, and it'll help with your survivability and sustain, since the battle roar passives gives you resources back. Now going on to the armor pieces, we're running 2-piece Bloodspawn. You have the option to run Bloodspawn. I like to switch between Bloodspawn and Balorgs. Specifically, you want you want mainly Impin, but you also want about 3 to 4 sturdy. I have 3 sturdy on. I think I have 2 sturdy on the body right now, but I'm finna change that to 2 sturdy or 3 sturdy on the body. 1 reinforced, maybe take the well-fitted away on the shoulder. But yeah, realistically, you want more sturdy than anything. The sprint speed is real nice, but I think I'd like to block a lot more. Since I do block a lot more, I'd like to reduce the cost way more. So we're running 1-piece trainee. So that's for that additional health that Redguard so desperately needs on this build. And that's one of the major pieces. I've seen a lot of people run trainee. I mean, I used to run trainee in the past on my old builds. I was like, yeah, I don't need that. I finally put that on, and it's like, it's been a lifesaver. For this patch, you want as much health as possible. I didn't say this on the stat sheet, since I said before, this is for a non-CP and CP build. So a non-CP, when you're on the sword and shield bar, if you don't have any health bonuses, and you're running the trainee belt on this kind of build, you're gonna be like 100 points shy of 24k max health, and you're gonna have a lot of stamina. So if you're an orc or you're a nord, you're gonna get over that 24k threshold. And if you're an imperial, which imperial is also really good on this build since they have really high sustain, they'll be at like 25 or almost 26k max health with relatively good resistances. So they'll be much harder to kill and have higher sustain. If you're an Imperial, let's say every minute you get about 3,330 magicka and stamina recovery on top of healing. And I think those can potentially crit. Well, the healing can potentially crit as well, since they get bonuses similar to Redguard in terms of every time they do a direct damage attack. So yeah, like I said, you want to run mainly Impin, but you want 3 sturdy on the body, potentially 1 well-fitted, and work around it. I have, let's see what I have. I have sturdy, well-fitted, Impin, 1 reinforced. So about 4 or 5 Impin, I think about 4 Impin, and the rest is sturdy and well-fitted and 1 reinforced. So for jewelry, you run all infused potentially, or you can run 1 robust to make up for any lack of stam. I like the little bit of robust, but if you want that additional weapon damage, go for infused. Bloodthirsty also works if you want to have that. Bloodthirsty is actually a great addition to the build if you want to run a stamina glyph anywhere. Excuse me. Preferably you want to have that Bloodthirsty on the Malakast band. Now, I've kind of been messing around with the Malakast band. I like the damage that it provides. If you want to go for Bloodthirsty and add more recoveries, I'd say go for the tri-stat recovery isn't bad, especially on this build, or you can go for the or just purely stamina. It's up to you. This also works well with infused, but if you kind of want a little in between, go for Bloodthirsty and stam recovery. So how Bloodthirsty works, the lower you get someone's health, the more damage you're given. This doesn't show on the tooltip, So just be mindful of that. Oh, also, Witch Knight's Defiance. I haven't really talked about that enough. So Witch Knight's Defiance, you get all weapon damage. It's paired well with 7th Legion, since 7th Legion gives you weapon damage and health recovery and a little bit of crit, mainly for your healing. Since you're running Malakast Band, you don't crit at all, which is fine, because if you're heavy DK, you don't crit anyway, unless you're a Khajiit. But anyway, yeah, so the increased the weapon damage by 361 against enemies inflicted with a poison damage effect. That does not affect any healing abilities. That only affects weapon skills and class abilities. Potentially it could affect class abilities that heal, but I'm not entirely sure. I haven't tested it. And I think that's all for the sets. Let's go straight into skills. So I'm gonna go back bar first. So for back bar, we got Volatile Armor, your classic DK resistances. We got Cauterize, which is a great, nice little burst heal that does crit quite often. You have Rally. You can mess around with Rally if you want. You can run for momentum if you desire. And we got Venomous Claw, back bar, paired with Executioner and Take Flight. So Cauterize, you have an option to either run a snare removal, or you can just keep Cauterize, or even Green's Dragon's Blood is very effective since you increase your healing over time. But I do like Cauterize quite a lot, since it's a nice little burst heal that you don't have to worry about applying too often. Just make sure it's maintained well. Just make sure if you'll have enough magic to really sustain it, whether you use Artaeum Takeaway Broth or the Bewitched Sugar Skulls, because since you're running heavy armor and the Constitution passive, you restore Magicka and Stamina when you take damage for each piece of heavy armor equipped. This effect can occur once every 4 seconds. So on top of your Magicka recovery and on top of like your potions recovery, you get Magicka and Stamina back every 4 seconds, which is a pretty hardy amount. You're in a good position to have good sustain. So you can maintain Cauterize and Volatile Armor very easily. Just make sure you don't cast them too often or make the mistake of doing that. Rally is a beautiful burst heal. It's been good for a long time. The burst heal is really solid. Plus the Stam recovery will pair with your major Stam recovery buff. Venomous Claw. Now with Venomous Claw, you don't want to refresh this too much. Most of its damage is going to be dealt on the back end. You want this to fall off and then reapply it instantly. This is primarily where most of your dot damage is going to come from, and it's going to be paired well with Noxious Breath. I run Executioner instead of Reverse Slice, since you want to finish people off as soon as possible. You don't have to try and execute multiple people at once. This is just a very efficient execute ability for Stam DK. So Take Flight, honestly, Leap is probably the best ultimate, but Dawnbreaker of Smiting is really effective as well. It's up to your playstyle and up to what you feel comfortable with. I honestly feel like Leap is better for my playstyle. I love Dawnbreaker of Smiting, but sometimes I miss it, or it just doesn't do enough instantaneous damage at one time. But the dot pressure is insurmountable. If you maintain all your dots on an enemy or on multiple enemies, you can finish people off. But it's just, if you want that burst, go for Take Flight. Take Flight is really good. Berserk Strike, I wanted to use it this patch, but I kind of shied away from it. I will attempt to use it in the future and see how much I like it. So let's go to the front bar. So we have Noxious Breath, we have Fragmented Shield, we have Resolving Vigor, we have Reverberating Bash, Deep Slash, and Corrosive Armor. So Noxious Breath is one of your paired spammables. You can use it in conjunction with Deep Slash, since they have the same tooltip direct damage value. Noxious Breath is just going to be calculated differently because it is a poison damage effect and not a physical damage effect. So if the numbers look different when you actually apply it, it's because the resistances function in different ways. Fragmented Shield specifically for that major mending. Resolving Vigor mainly for the healing. Reverberating Bash not only as a spammable defensive and offensive CC, but a form of your burst. So you have to use, when you apply all your damage over time abilities, you go you go first after you apply all your damage over time abilities. You go into Reverberating Bash. Now, it's not just the upfront damage, it's the backloaded damage as well, since after the stun, the enemy takes additional physical damage. What you do is, after you follow up with the reverb after applying dots, you immediately follow up with either Noxious Breath and then into Deep Slash, and that's where a majority of the burst comes from. Now, you use them in conjunction, one costs less than the other. So when you use them in conjunction, you're managing your sustain properly, you're doing light attacks and heavy attacks, you're maintaining your major buffs, and then you're consistently following up with burst dealing attacks. So this is where a majority of your burst comes from these two abilities. If you use them in conjunction appropriately, you can refresh Noxious Breath as many times as you want, which is fine. It'll still have really good dot pressure because the damage is always consistent when it comes to dots. And then with Deep Slash, it's not only a part of your main form of damage, but your main form of survivability, since it afflicts enemies hit with minor maim, reducing their damage done to you by 5% for 12 seconds. And this also works as an AoE. This is a good AoE spammable, especially for those pesky sorts who want to hide behind their pets, so they won't be able to evade all of the damage. So this is one of those really good abilities. You have really two strong spammable AoE abilities or AoE inconal abilities. You'll constantly be on top of people. Now, if you don't want to run Reverberating Bash as a CC, Fossilize works. You just have to, if you want to use Fossilize or the other morph as a CC, you will have to most certainly use, you'll have to use Bewitched Sugar Skulls because you want enough Magicka to sustain yourself, because you don't have that much Magicka non-CP and CP. Fossilize is a pretty good CC, but it can be kind of wonky sometimes as well. So front bar, flex spots. So if you're dueling or you're in a situation where you're dueling, you can use Dawnbreaker Smiting on front bar or Leap on front bar. But in open world or in non-CP situations, when you're fighting in a small group, you Spell Wall, or you can use Temporal Guard. I don't have Temporal Guard on this character, so Temporal Guard, it gives you that it gives you the ability to get out and dodge. You'll be able to reset 5 seconds prior, and it'll give you some of your resources back. Also, it gives you that minor protection buff. But if you don't want to run that and you want a consistent form of minor protection, put that back. You can run Ransack. Ransack is good. You'll just have to run. You'll just have to make sure you maintain good dot pressure. So Ransack, you'll get that. You get a little bit of damage out. Then you'll give them that major and that major breach, and major and that physical and yeah. I'm sorry. I'm laying an egg. You'll take some of the resistances away, and you gain minor protection for 15 seconds. This is really good for survivability. So when you hit this, you maintain vigor, your poisons go off, and you pop a potion, you ain't dying. The same thing kind of with Corrosive. Corrosive will keep you alive. Just be mindful with all the proc sets, you'll still die. Just make sure you maintain all your major buffs before you go offensive. Now, looking at some of the racial passives, if you do decide to play this as Redguard, which I don't advise, it has good offensive sustain, like I've said before. Just be mindful that other races are better. They have better they have better skills, especially Orc and Nord. So like I said before, if you plan to do this as an Orc, you can do it in heavy, and you have just as many options when it comes to the mundus to really diversify, and I guess so on and so forth. The Orc, you really can't go wrong this patch. Nord, play this build in medium. I played this in medium. It works great. I love it in medium. The sustain is really good. The damage is high. And I'll probably have I have another build on Nord coming out probably in the next few days. I want to get this out sooner. But yeah, if you want to play this build specifically at Nord, you can do that. If you want to do it Imperial, you can do that. If you want to do it in Khajiit, you can do it. It doesn't matter what race. Okay. I switched locations because I want to go through some comprehensive stuff, but first things first, I'm going to go through CP. I'm going to start in the red tree, starting at the steed. So we got 37 Ironclad, 34 in resistance. You can beef these up depending on how much resistances you want to build later on. It's just because I put more into heavy armor. You got 72 in the thick-skinned, 49 in the hardy, 43 in elemental defender. We have 35 into heavy armor focus. That's just to beef it up so it gets closer to where Nord is in terms of physical resistance. You have 13 into sprinter, and 40 into warlord. 56 into healthy, and 56 into mooncalf. 23 into tenacity. Got 56 into shadow ward, 9 in tumbling, 17 in befoul. Befoul's kind of in a place where like I don't have anything that really defiles, except for my enchant, but I don't really use the enchant anymore. We got 14% into Blessed. This is mainly to have magic abilities cost less after using potions. You have Shattering 9 into Shattering Blows, 10 into Physical Weapon Expert, and 56 into Master at Arms. You could play around with this as much as you would like. We have 11 into Thaumaturge, and we have 23 into Precise Strikes. You can switch this up since specifically you're using damage over time effects, and that's your primary source of damage. So for CP, you can switch that up. Precise Strikes is still important even if you're using Malakath's Band, just because it affects your healing only. We have 22 into Piercing. So in CP, you're roughly at you're a little bit over 2,000, not 2,000, but 10,000 armor penetration. So you kind of want to build that Piercing up since it's going to buff all your attacks. And we have 64 in the Mighty. So this is pretty much the end of the build video. Now I'm going to go through the comprehensive portion, mainly talking about using your skills defensively and offensively. So if you enjoyed the build video, I want to say thanks again for watching. So let's jump right into the comprehensive portion of the build video. So we're going to start with defense, since this is mainly sword and shield as your offensive and defensive capabilities. So first things first, you want to maintain your major buffs. It's imperative that volatile armor, cauterize, resolving vigor, rally, and fragmented shield are maintained. This will prevent you from taking unnecessary damage by out-healing it. This is also increases your survivability and sustain. So if you maintain all this stuff, it's going to keep you up, include in conjunction with your potion when you actually have to hit the potion. You'll be so much more tankier. Like if you maintain vigor every 8 to 10 seconds, because really, since you're on your front bar majority of the time, you should be weaving in your light and heavy attacks with your vigor in conjunction. And you can kind of be defensive and offensive at the same time. This is really up in your face kind of build, but like you should really play it where like you can go offensive and defensive at a moment's notice. It's kind of why it's sword and shield. So next is block casting. So blocking at the right moments will prevent you from taking the full brunt of damage. There's no greater mitigation than blocking. To block cast means to actively block potential incoming attacks, well, hard-hitting attacks. This can save your life, so make sure you pay attention to your opponent's playstyle and look for those moments when you need to be defensive. This especially means when you are at low health and you need to recover. So when you're in those situations, or you're just taking a shit ton of damage, or you're about to get a shit ton of damage, and you see, like, let's say if it's a Stam blade, let's say, I don't want to say a dueling Stam blade setup because that build is kind of the norm. Like, let's say if you see a hard-hitting Stam blade coming at you, usually they'll kind of move around you, kite around you, just set you up for a burst combo, and then come towards you with the two-hander. When you see the Nightblade start to come at you with the two-hander, that's really when you need to block, because their burst combo is coming in that moment. So in that position, you can really prepare for it by block casting, instantly going in for the CC and moving behind them and reapplying all your debuffs to them. So the next thing I want to talk about is movement. You want to move in a pattern that is hard for your opponents to keep up with. This means work towards their back or their sides. Be careful going straight through opponents because they can hit you directly without much effort. Move in a way that provides you the greatest benefit. So what I mean by that is, never really stand in front of anyone and do your full combo. I mean, you can, but if you're going to stand in front of somebody, it's just the CC and get behind them. So with movement and defense, you want to focus on separating when you have to be defensive. You can use your CC as a form of defense and go complete and press them completely. So you don't want to go on defense for too long. Only long enough to heal completely back up. You go back on offense with the CC and then reapply your debuffs and your buffs. In the moment where your defense, you reapply all your buffs and maintain your vigor. If you maintain vigor, you're not going to have any serious issues, especially if you're making it hard for them to hit you. Excuse me. Most importantly, like I kind of led into, knowing when to turtle up and knowing when the burst is coming. Like I said before, if you notice how most people play, you know when the burst is coming. A Nightblade only comes near you when they're ready to end cap you and hit you with Assassin Scourge or Spectral Bow. A Warden's ready to execute you right when they get close to you almost immediately. As soon as you see the shocks come down, you need to be blocking. You need to be blocking and getting ready to CC. Same thing with the Stam DK. When he CCs you, just expect a leap coming. If you see somebody spamming Dizzying Swing, you just expect their ultimate to be dropped. So like in those situations, you need to be blocking and getting ready to set up your own counter attack, which is really just setting up your burst combo, start with the CC, drop some debuffs, make sure your buffs are up, and drop your own ultimate. So that way you'll be offensive and defensive at the same time. And one of the most important factors of being defensive is when to get the hell out of there. In situations where you are either taking too much damage or outnumbered by a large force, and know when to run, and you need to be able to expect this before it actually gets to you. You need to be actively minded to know when to get the hell out. Like you're tanky, but you're not that tanky. You can heal through some shit, but you're still gonna take damage. Know when to get the hell out and dodge. Don't sit in fights or don't go towards fights thinking, I can kick these guys' ass, but not, can you kick 4 people's ass really quickly? I'm not sure. You might be able to, but yeah, you probably want to get the hell out of there. Okay, now time for the offensive comprehensive guide. So going into more of the offensive skills, we're going to start with buffing and light attacks. Most of your attacks are going to be led up with light attacks. So yeah, light attack damage is going to be a major source of your damage, since like that's primarily most of your attacks. Light attacks and heavy attacks are going to be a huge amount of your damage. Like pretty much everything you do is going to have a light attack or a heavy attack weaved in. This way you don't really consume all your stamina by just spamming abilities. So yeah, most of your damage is 100% going to be light attack damage. Like I said, if it's an ulti dump, light attack or a heavy attack. Deep slash, light attack comes first. Noxious breath, light attack comes first. Even volatile armor, light attack comes first. So that way your weapon damage enchant is always off on the back bar. It's always going off. And you're always dealing damage. So now, the most important part of the build is the constant CC. Whenever anyone is not CC immune, you CC them instantly. I don't care if you have like, I don't care if you're not at your burst combo yet or what, like you CC them immediately. Because the CC is the added pressure is what's really a part of your burst, because right after the CC, there's an additional burst done from the ability. Like when they break CC, there's more damage done. And that's a huge part of your burst combo. Because once all your buffs are up and once you completely dot everything up, go into reverb and then noxious breath, and then follow up with your leap, they're already in execute range. They're well into execute range. So just constantly CC. Now with the combos, you need to make sure your dots are kept up and maintained well. Because really the damage is going to come from your damage over time abilities. Like your Venomous Claw is your highest damage dealing ability. You reapply that as many times as you, well not as many times you can, you don't apply that. You don't want to refresh it, but you want to make sure it's maintained very well. Noxious Breath you can refresh constantly. You can refresh that as many times as you want. Just don't do it too much. Because your main spammable actually is Deep Slash, but it can be used in conjunction with Noxious Breath. Noxious Breath is actually a pretty good damage, direct damage effect. So the setup, I'm going to use this in conjunction with movement. Like I said, when the defensive portion, you kind of want to move in a way where like you have the advantage. Like when you CC, you move around them into their sides. You never really stand directly in front of them. You stand directly in front of anyone, they're just going to use their dot. They're just going to use their ultimate on you just to be defensive. And it's going to fuck your setup up. So realistically, let's say if you are kind of standing in front of them, they're kind of playing defensive, you're kind of playing defensive, you step in and you step out. Light attack in, heavy light attack in, and then ability out. Like light attack in, deep slash, light attack in, noxious breath, medium attack in, and venomous claw. This is to kind of lull them into your game. You want to be a little patient with that, and then you follow up with a CC once you see all your dots are applied, and then follow up with your burst with the ulti dot. So the burst window is next. The burst window is basically that window where you can do the most absolute devastating damage possible. So the burst window is always after when all your dots are applied and right after the CC. Right after the CC, your animation cancel it. And this is usually when the ultimate's up. When all your major buffs are up and your minor buffs are up and you hit the leap, your major portion of damage is going to come from leap. And then you go straight into execute. If they won't be executed as easily, you restart the combo over and then go back into execute phase. If all your dots are up, people usually fall over. Well, most people usually fall over. If they're very skilled, it's going to take some time. You're going to have to outplay them very well. Now with the ultimates, you want to time your ultimates very well. Like I said, you want to make sure you maintain your major dots. You want to have enough burst put into them. Now people will try to block your ultimates, especially when they know they're coming. When people know they're coming, they will block them, so be mindful of that. You want to get them ready. You want to get them nice and CC immune, because this is because your ulti dumps is really what's going to finish people off, if not the execute. And on a DK, the ulti dumps come really fast. So if you're using leap will get people really close to execute range, but you have to make sure all your dots are applied so you can finish. So if you're going to set up for the ulti dumps, make sure those dots are up. If you're just trying to use your ultimate defensively and get resources back, use it that way. Now, like if you use Dawnbreaker Smiting, make sure you're in a position where you can actually hit them and not miss. I've actually preferred Leap over Dawnbreaker Smiting in most scenarios, just because I miss quite a bit, because I make mistakes. I'm human. But yeah, that's mainly it for that. You want to kind of set up stuff. You want to have good movement. You want to set up your dots. That's including volatile armor. You want to play defensive. You want to block cast. And you want to know when to use your burst combos effectively. Well guys, we reached the end of the video. I hope this was valuable. It helped you guys break away from the meta a little bit. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section. I have more builds coming out soon, so I hope you stay tuned. Thanks again for watching, and keep on slaying. Later.